The priesthood of all believers is an essential component to enabling congregations to thrive and to also meet the needs for ministerial leadership. Jerry Krause is someone who can speak well to that because he has been an essential part of the Warrensburg congregation and helped to enable that congregation to practice the priesthood of all believers effectively.
I just wanted to share a little bit about what I have observed and appreciated about the Warrensburg Church of the Brethren, and perhaps the somewhat unique fact that we have had a ministry team for almost 20 years here, and I think it works well. Ministry of plural ministry thrives in our experience. I have spent 17 years in the school system as a counselor, and one of the things that I've learned about the school system is that the culture in each school building really matters, and the culture can be different depending on the building you're in. I've learned that every person in the building has an effect on the culture. I think that translates well to the church. And particularly in our experience at the Warrensburg Church of the Brethren, I think there's a culture that enables the priesthood of all believers to thrive. And I think the priesthood of all believers is the foundation that supports plural ministry. The two things about the culture that I've experienced here are that we have a culture of acceptance and affirmation, and we have a culture of calling. What I mean by the culture of acceptance and affirmation is when we think of the priesthood of all believers, anyone who accepts Jesus as their Lord and Savior is choosing to follow Jesus. And we believe in the Church of the Brethren that that means each of us is choosing to be a minister, in a sense, to be in the priesthood of all believers, using our gifts and our voices as the Spirit leads us to edify the church and to be the voice and hands and feet of Jesus. That's what I would call the priesthood of all believers. A culture of acceptance and affirmation in the church means that we see that in one another. And we provide hospitality, meaning that everyone is welcome in the church, and that we honor everyone's voice and everyone's gift, and we affirm that gift. Share a story about how I saw that work with this congregation. There was a child who accepted Christ, was baptized in 6th grade. His gift, his passion was to be a percussionist. He played drums in the band. So he wanted to use that gift in worship. Our congregation, to my knowledge, had never had drums in worship before, but they saw this new member's passion for being a percussionist. And so the congregation affirmed that and invited him to play drums, to accompany hymns along with the pianist. In fact, at one point, the congregation went ahead and purchased a drum set. We had a drum set in the front of the church, and I know some people thought it might have been noisy, but I didn't hear complaints. To the contrary, people were excited that this young person wanted to use his gift in worship. That reflects that culture of acceptance and affirmation that I think is essential for the priesthood of all believers to thrive in a congregational setting. The second thing in our congregation is the culture of calling, where we affirm the gifts of others and specifically gifts for leadership. We call those out and affirm those in people. I don't think that necessarily naturally happens. I think we need to be intentional about that. In our congregation, we have been. Our pastoral team and our deacon body annually, when we come to our congregational forum meeting in the fall, they'll set aside some time where they'll facilitate a time where members who've come to the forum can write on a piece of paper the name or names of people who they see as gifted for leadership in the church. Once names have been submitted, that's again, it's confidential. The deacons and pastoral team review the names, and then they set up groups of 2 to go make a face-to-face visit with the person who was called, simply to say, you've been called, your gifts have been affirmed, and we celebrate that in you, and we want you to know that. It's not meant to be a high-pressure thing where we expect a response from the person right away, but we want the person to know that their gifts have been appreciated and affirmed. Sometimes that's as far as it goes. But right now we have on our ministry team a couple of people who maybe 10 or 12 years ago received that visit from the deacons and the members of the pastoral team. So we see that as an intentional process of calling out gifts and leadership. One other thing I will share is that we have support from our district. We're in a district where a number of congregations have closed over the years, and when the property's been sold, those funds have been put into a fund called it's called the Building on the Foundation Fund. And that money then is available for folks in churches to use for ministry or ministry training. Right now, a couple members of our ministry team, one of them is going to Bethany Seminary and is using some of that funding to help cover some of the cost of the Bethany training. Another person is receiving training elsewhere, and they've applied for and receiving gifts, financial gifts from the district to help cover that. So the whole church is involved, in my experience, with creating this culture that is enabling the shared ministry to flourish in the Warrensburg Church of the Brethren. Just wanted to share that. I think the priesthood of all believers is who we are, and we're living that out here because we embody that culture of acceptance and affirmation and the culture of calling.